Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody, the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and the herein sponsor of my podcast. So I appreciate Telehelping for allowing me the opportunity to speak with people like Chad. How are you doing this morning, Chad?
I'm great. How are you?
It is Friday, and
it is Friday.
Considering nowadays that my wife's getting really close to having our second child, and I'm very busy at work, Friday means a lot to me nowadays.
Yes, absolutely. It's like the end of life number one and the start of life number two for a couple of days, right? Like, yeah. So congratulations on that. That's awesome.
I'm very excited for it, Chad, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to touch on things like that. But first, I want to let the folks who listen in, who is Chad? Tell us, who are you, sir?
Yeah, man. I'm just kind of a nerdy kid that got to do some, I think, cool stuff in life. You know what I mean? I'm a dad, first of all, right? I got 2 kids, so fully appreciative of where you're at. Mine are kind of on the other end. I've got one that actually turns 21 tomorrow, and one that's in 8th grade, about to high school. So I'm kind of running out of that time that you're so looking forward to. I'm on the other end of that thing. And I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, not so much as I get older. I've calmed it down, but certainly, like to do things that get the blood flowing. So I'm big on snowboarding, like mountain biking, although the trails are a little calmer these days than they were 20 years ago. Try to chase a golf ball around and find it in the weeds every now and then, for fun, and try to involve my kids in all that stuff, and just like have fun with them, man, and in kind of enjoy life, and I'm a little bit of a workaholic, right? So that is certainly part of the balance that I try to find in there, but I'm just kind of a nerd that enjoys this stuff. So I've found a good, I think, mix of life and business and family all in one. Married, my wife has 2 kids of her own, and so balancing kind of an intermixed family, and everybody's got their own things that they're into. We've got some creatives, we've got some athletes, we've got a little bit of everything in our house, man. So that's my life is fun and hectic and fast paced, and that's kind of how I like it.
Chad, that's great. And I know I said that I had our second child. It's my second child with my wife. However, my bonus daughter here, she's my stepdaughter as well, and she's going 9th grade. It's 9th grade, 8th or 9th. It's one of those. I believe she's gearing up for high school in the coming year, and so and she's nothing shy of a handful, and so I get that.
Quite an adventure, man. There's a lot of changes as you see them, like from little kid to a high schooler is a little intimidating. So yeah, exactly where I'm at.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was actually having that conversation with my wife last night. As we're gearing up to have our second boy, right? And we have a 2.5-year-old now, and getting ready to have another boy. I thought there for a second, like, whew, man, we're gonna have teenage boys. Like, wow, that's scary. Like, I am worried for the world.
Yeah. I remember me as a teenager, and I was fortunate. My son was a lot calmer through the teenage years than I was. So, yeah, appreciate that. I'm hopeful that my daughter follows in that, and we'll see. Yet to be determined, right?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you said that you got a mix of the households. You have the creatives and the mindsets, and I think that's something interesting to identify in your kids as they're growing up. And I look at my daughter from that perspective, where I'm like, well, while she and I don't share blood, like, she is a lot like me in the sense that she wants to go against the grain, wants to, defy the status quo of things. And she has a very, I'd say, even more creative mind than I do in so many respects. And I see her, I'm like, well, she's could be like a chief marketing officer or a mark of innovative for, like, she has the mindset of a CEO, right? She has the mindset
Yeah, that's
of
awesome.
of going after it. And then I said, like, man, we're gonna have this like son of mine who seems to be my copy. And so, you know, chat about that, like, chat about how you have your kids, and I'm sure you have directions you want them to go, right? And then they have the
They choose
directions
it.
that,
Yes.
yeah, correct.
Yeah, they choose it. It's absolutely, man. It's super interesting. Like just the differences between my kids, and same parents, same environment, same kind of set of circumstances, but very different in the things they're interested in what drives them. Like what drives my son, what drives my stepdaughter, very different than what drives my daughter, right? My daughter is very uh, super focused. Like I have to do this, I have to do this, then I'm going to this, and it's very kind of structured. I'm the same way. I get up at 4:35. Used to be 4:37 for years, but somehow my snooze button changed the number of minutes that I snooze for. So I get up at the same time. I eat Chipotle on Tuesday at 11:30. This is what's happening. Like, it's very structured. And my daughter's very much that way. And then my son, my stepdaughter, my stepson, man, they're all very much like kind of more go with the flow, and we don't really need that. And I don't know what I'm going to do today. I'll figure it out. But then you see these things that really like excite them, right? And I think that, like as a parent, I think that's what it's all about, is like help expose your kids to things so they can find that thing that like excites them, you know. And like my stepdaughter is very creative. She's locked in when it's time to make music. Like that's what drives her. That's what gets her going. Um, but she doesn't do that on a schedule. It's like she wakes up at a random hour and she feels creative and she's just like all into that.
Yeah.
Whereas my daughter and I are much more kind of structure driven, and what's the next goal and what's the process to get to it. And now I've checked that off. So yeah, man, I think as a parent, like just, and I love being an entrepreneur in this because I never have to really work pure 8 to 5. It's not, it's my daughter's doing this today, someone's
That's a
doing this
great
today.
point.
So I'm there for that. I'm there to support that and show them that if they're excited about it, like I'm excited about them being excited about it. And that gives me some flexibility in life, to not miss some of those things where, if you're punching in at 8 and out at 5 and it's pretty rigid, you
Yeah.
miss some of those things, and there's some trade-off for that. Now, on the other side of that, I think my kids have also seen kind of the challenges that come with that, the cranking out late nights when, again, you clock out at 5, it's like kind of nice because you're done. You own
Yeah.
the business, something needs done. You're up at 11, 12, back up at 4 in the morning, like whatever it takes to kind of get it done. And so, they've seen that too. And I think, when I look at my son, that's not as appealing to him. He really, doesn't kind of like that. He's more chill and he doesn't want to have to kind of like, do that. My daughter, on the other hand, is very much that way. So yeah, it's super interesting, man. But I think showing them that and letting them kind of see the pros and cons of both, and getting that exposure to what the world has to offer, and then helping them like find what they're excited about. I think that's what it's all about. And
I love
why in
it.
the world would we be trying to build something if it wasn't to, to support them? So yeah, man, it's like that family
I
dynamic is fascinating to me.
No, and I love that so much, Chad, because it's really weird the parallels that we're having this morning and the conversation I was having with my wife like at 9 o'clock last night. Being that she's very pregnant, she can't go to sleep, and so and so we're having late night conversations. And I was telling her, we work a lot because what you said in the beginning, you're workaholic. Well, I don't know many entrepreneurs that aren't workaholics at
Yeah.
some phase, right? We have in if things go well, or the things that the way you would like them to go, the idea is that you don't have to be a workaholic. You may always be one, right?
Yep.
But you won't need to be one. And so I was just having this conversation with my wife last night, and I was like, it's, I'm glad I'm busy right now. I had a really busy period, and then I did some exits, and then for the first 2 years or a year and a half of my son's life, like I did nothing. Like I was on sabbatical, right? Telehelping basically ran itself. And so,
Yes.
and all I had my requirement was just like maintain business size. I'm like, we lose a client, get a client, lose a client, get a client kind of mentality, just, maintain attrition. I didn't want to grow because I just wanted the company to do its thing. And I wanted to be present and live after, 5 years of working 20-hour days. Right. And, I tell my wife now, I'm like, this is our last kid. Done. I'm over it. No more children. Right. We have two boys, one girl, no mas. But one thing that I look at is I want to be I want my kid to play tennis. Like, we have a tennis body. Like I'm not gonna say I'm a great tennis player. I don't want anybody to quote me there. I'm better than most. And so, and I want him to play tennis. I want to play tennis with him. Like I want that to be my afternoons when he's done with school. Like I want to go to his games, go to his parent teacher conferences. Like when he is around or they're around the boys and do things with them, because what's the point of all this? Like, and what is and I grew up and I wanted to ask you like how your upbringing differed than the one you're providing for your kids, because something I think about often is my kids are going to live a fairly, they already do, the ones who exist, fairly privileged life. And I didn't have a privileged life, but not having a privileged life made me who I am, right? Maybe going to the Marine Corps, had to go find scheduling, discipline, and timeliness and everything, punctuality. But that made me who I was. I worry when I see my kid is he's not going to experience the same, tumultuous experiences, which is good in some respects that I had to go through because I didn't have privilege. And so that's something I worry about. Being around, and he's like, well, Dad's with me all day. Well, Dad's with you all day because the 20 years before you came along, right? I was breaking my back.
Everybody sees the tip of the iceberg. They don't see all that went in below. I mean, and that's the whole thing. And that's what's been kind of neat about, I had kids pretty young. And so my son was my college graduation present. So so he was born, and like 30 days later I graduated from college, and there was no what am I going to do after I graduate? It was like time to hustle, man. I got a little mouth to feed here. And I was entrepreneurial in college, but to your question, I worry about it too. You know what I mean? My kids grew up, and I think because I had them young, especially my son, he saw a lot more of the grind part. My daughter I kind of like break work into a couple things that are oversimplified, but grind and hustle. Everybody loves the hustle, man. That's like when things are going right and things are rocking and rolling, and it's all kind of clicking and firing on all cylinders. The grind are those tough days, man, where you got problem phone calls coming in and people that need something, and you're buried and you're behind, and you're kind of getting through it. And I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, everybody looks at the entrepreneur and sees that hustle, and they're like, oh man, that he hustled and he made it or she made it, and that's awesome, and that's where I want to be. But they don't always see that grind. And I do worry about that. I worry about that a little bit with my kids. Like, are they going to be able to kind of grind through that adversity? Because that's a big question in our society today, right? Like, can we overcome adversity, or have we created a generation that hasn't had to have much adversity, and we've kind of jumped in and solved it for them? And what does that mean, for the future? And I do worry about that a little bit. But I think when I look at the way I grew up, my parents didn't go to college. They didn't have that. So they were very adamant that I go. And they weren't talking about which school you should go to. It wasn't, you got to make it to Harvard or you got to make it to a D1. It was, you just need to go to school. And they were pretty adamant about that. And my parents are very, very different. I grew up, with a divorced household. So, and very, very different. But when I think about who I am today, I see each of them in who I am. My mom, always a hard worker, always like head down, quiet, whatever needs done. but not going to stand up and say like, hey, we need to do this way. She's very, very kind of timid, but a hard worker, and always kind of said, you got to leave things better than you found them. Right. So it kind of instilled this, like, this part of me that's like, do good, do good. Like,
Sure.
it's not your mess. That's okay. Clean it up. It's not, you're not going to get rich if these are the people you help them anyway. Like, just help make things better, leave them better than you found them. And I've tried to kind of instill that in my kids too, and as kids, sometimes we don't really understand that or think like, why should I do that? But it matters in life, and it matters in society as a whole. And so that's a big part of like my upbringing was, we didn't have a ton, didn't have a lot of money. I remember driving out, but they were very supportive of the things I wanted to do. I loved baseball growing up.
Nice.
My stepdad was a big baseball guy. My mom was very supportive. So, they would take me to the baseball games, and they would, take me out so I could sell the candy bars, so I could pay the fee to get my uniform, like all those things that we had to do. And so they were supportive of that. And I remember one time we were on our way to a tournament, and there were all these really nice houses and grass everywhere. And I said, what is that? I'd never seen a place like this before. And my mom says, oh, that's where the rich people live. And it was houses on a golf course, right? But that was the first time I'd ever seen that. I was probably 10 years old.
Wow.
before I like went into a place, went past a neighborhood where it was like, whoa, those are big houses, and why is the yard so big? It's a golf course, and my kids got to grow up in a country club, like very, very different, right? So at 10 years
Stark
old, I'm
contrast.
like, what is that? And my kids think that you can go into this place and you can just order what you want and they just bring it to you. Like, that's just how it works, right? So
Correct.
You do worry about that. Like, did I do this where they can't overcome adversity?
It's such a tough balance. And that's why I love being in Mexico when I'm in Mexico, because we're really close to my wife's family there, and they get the opportunity to experience Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Part of Mexico we live in is, we would equate it to the top 1% of the 1% of where we live in Mexico, which is beautiful. Right? We live on a lake, right? We're at the beach, right?
Yep.
We're ocean view. And then we'll go to visit the family, and it's this tiny little pueblo in the middle of central Mexico, and you have to dip water from the bucket to flush the toilet. And, they need to experience that, because, if they're going to go back to where I grew up, like you said, like, well, what, it was a country club. Like, I remember that I had the same exact thought process. I'm like, what are those things? Are those houses or apartment buildings? Right. And so, I had the same thing. And, I think it's a conscious mindset. It's one of those things where we have to ask ourselves, do we want our kids to be like us, or do we want them to get further, not having to experience the hardship we experience? And that's where I've kind of shifted my thought process to. And this one over my head here, love that girl to death, but she's destined to find out the hard way. And it's unfortunate. Right. And it's just one of those things. A kid, you can't choose a path for them. They're going to choose their path. And I, as the bonus dad, only have so much influence, right? I'm at best, I'm an example, right? And so, but for like my sons, like, my family's been in the military forever, right? It would be great if they go to the military, but wouldn't it be nice if like one of us were an officer finally?
Right, yeah. Like didn't start through the grind, but kind of did the things to get to the hustle. Yeah,
correct.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But then I think, sometimes I think about what our kids today face because of, social media and the influencing world and all of this. And I think they have to overcome a tremendous amount of adversity, but in a very different place, like and I think we all kind of look back. I remember my parents, like, back in my day, so I don't want to be like a back in my day kind of guy. But at the same time, like, I think about, what adversity meant for my generation. And it was like, it wasn't the same adversity as the previous. Like when I think of kind of a tough life, what my tough life version was nothing when I think about like what my grandparents went through. And my grandparents moved into a tar paper shack, literally a tar paper shack in the woods of Missouri, and they stored their food in a cave, and that's how they started. My some of my best friends that I grew up with, that I still stay connected with today, were over in the next, what they were, the hippies in the holler is what my grandpa would call them. And their parents rocked in a cave and lived in it for like 3 years while they slowly built an actual house. They didn't get an indoor toilet until we were sophomores in college. Like, but and then I kind of compared that to my tough life. It was like, no, man, I lived in a house. I lived in a city when I was younger.
Running water.
Water. I flipped the lights on. It works. And then later in my childhood, we moved down into the Missouri woods where my grandparents were, and very different environment. Like talking about, sometimes the toilet wouldn't flush because the squirrels had chewed a hole in the water line because it was gravity fed over the side of a cliff. Like, and I think like my kids will never know, like putting a rope on and crossing on a creek on a log. But we
don't want them. We don't want them to either, right? It's like, be very clear.
They have to deal with some very different adversities and pressures around, like, money defines you, or your income defines you a lot in today's society. And that, I think that's a tremendous amount of adversity that, we don't often kind of give them as much credit for. Like kids were always mean, like that's always part of life. But I think this adversity that they face in today's world is much different, but probably shouldn't be discounted. Like, because it's still in the same framework, like your situation defines you, and so we're going to define you by that. And where that comes from.
What I'm hearing from you is saying is that we faced it seems, one-dimensional problems, right? Water, food, warmth, shelter. I used an outhouse, right, until I was like 8 years old, right? And by the way, I didn't know people weren't using outhouses as a kid, right? I thought that was a thing growing up. And it wasn't until I lived with my grandmother, I'm like, oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. And so, but you're right. Like our kids, they're facing these multi-dimensional problems. And one thing that I've really started repeating, I think more frequently now than ever, is I fear that one day my son will start caring about what people think about him. And my nightmare is that he'll never recover. Right. And you said it, social media, right? Okay. So let's get this straight. You have to not disappoint your parents. You got to do well in school. You have to be popular on whatever social media they're going to experience, right? If it's the same ones today. And then, like you said, we live in a money prioritizing culture. And to be very clear, everyone's always needed money, right? There's been a currency, and before paper, it was, fine metals and so on and so forth, and goods, right? It's always been important. But nowadays, it's like, oh, if you don't make $1 million a year, you're no one. Well, I can tell you right now, I know how hard it is to make $1 million a year. And by God, I know no one's doing that. Right. And you don't do it, I promise you. And this mentality on social media is that is success. Yeah. Like, and how are they ever going to, it's a lofty goal, and people will forever fall short, and they have to balance all those juggles at the same time.
I think more than ever, like if you break down human behavior, we've always kind of, your circumstance defines you, right? You're a peasant, or you're a lord, or you're a whatever. You're a worker bee, or you're a capitalist. Like we've always kind of used to some degree, like money and circumstance to define people. But I think, to your point, like defining based on those metrics and your personal value based on those metrics are different. And I think more so today, these kids face absolutely like, oh, you don't have those particular types of clothes, then you don't have any value. And I think that's very different than like, you're here, I'm here. Like, it's very subtle, but more so than ever, I really think they face this kind of crisis of your personal value around money. And so for my kids, I've never, I mean, they have nice things, they've been fortunate, I think, but like, when my son was 16, he got a car. I thought that was a big deal, right?
Very.
But he didn't get a brand new car, right? Like, you're going to get a used car where, you're going to earn your money, you're going to do this. My daughter is kind of getting to that age where more and more clothes matter, the things matter. And so, it's a little bit of a challenge of, do I just give this all to you? Or do I make sure that you define your value by you and who you are? And wonderful if we can afford the Uggs versus the knockoff Uggs or whatever, but that shouldn't define your value. And I think that's something that we didn't have to face. Like, we didn't have to face those, I mean, sexting in middle school, right? I mean, that's a pressure.
I know.
Wow. Can you imagine, like, as messed up as you are as a preteen and a teenager, having to worry about how your face and body look and are filtered when it's out on the internet, where it's there for, I mean, I think there's this adversity that they face. I think it's definitely shifted, where very grateful that they're not facing as much of the financial adversity and feeling some of those impacts. But just because, that old adage, money does not bring happiness, it just changes the problems,
Chad, it's so interesting that we're having so many of the same conversations I had with my wife last night. It's great having them outside that bubble with someone who's experiencing it in their own life as well. And, recently my wife was talking with her daughter, bonus daughter here for me, and she, doesn't listen to a whole lot that I say. And I understand that. I'm Cody, right? And so, but when she's talking to my wife, she's sitting here, it's like, oh, boys. And my wife's like, listen to me and listen to me good, right? She's like, you'll understand my life experience in a way that you can only experience it if you prioritize boys. She's like, you're going to make a mistake and it's going to cost you your experience. And she's like, listen, she's like, if you want to understand me sooner than you would otherwise want to realize it as an adult having children, the difficulty that comes with that when you're established, she's like, do it when you're in high school. Go ahead. She's like, let me tell you, you will call me asking me for advice quicker than you ever thought you would, because you didn't know this would ever be an outcome. And that was a conversation I was having with my wife just last night. She said, Cody, because I'm a hardliner on a lot of things. I am a Marine by nature, right? And so, so what would you do if, say, our oldest son ended up having a baby with someone young? He come home and he told you that so-and-so girl was pregnant. And I said, well, my depression age grandmother who raised me for a portion of my life comes out, and I was like, well, he better figure it out, because he's on his own and he's going to raise that kid. I'd already had my kids, and that idea pops into my mind immediately. But then I also asked myself, I'm not where my grandmother, who was raising us on her retirement and savings, was, right? And so, like, I could technically, I could float the guy, right? Yep. Like I could put him and said person who's going to birth my grandchild up in an apartment, a condo, while he continued to pursue his career, while he continued to get an education, because requirement, right? Like you said, your parents, like, is a must-have. Do I think it's going to make you successful? No, but you don't want to not have it, right? And that makes things far more difficult. And so, like, I could do those things. So what would I teach him if I did that? Like, if I'm like, oh, you can be reckless and then I'll come and save you. And Teresa, my wife, is like, well, like, how would you address that? I'm like, oh, it's fine. The finance thing, the business kicks in. So I'm going to basically open up a line of credit for him that he'll repay me for over the course of his life. And I'm just going to go ahead I'm gonna give him a line of credit.
There you go. Yeah, yeah, because it's like you gotta
and then
pay
when you
up,
get
right?
established, you'll pay me back, right? You know,
Yeah.
I told you not to do this, but I will bail you out like the federal government, but you owe me.
Well,
So it's
that's the
crazy.
challenge with society, right? Is like what is that right timeline? Like I'm a big believer that education and learning is what you need. I serve on the foundation for my alma mater from college, trying to help kids pay for school, and it's jaw dropping what these degrees are costing kids today. And so, like my son decided he didn't want to go to college. He said, I don't think it's really for me. I'm like, great, go get some experience, but don't stop learning, because
Correct.
I think one of the challenges that they have today, is you can make all the right decisions and still be broke as hell, right? Even though you made all the
Correct.
right decisions, but you go to $100,000, or a $50,000 a year school, and you want to be a teacher, that math you're never going to win at that. So sometimes in the way that society has put this value proposition together, these kids face, things where you can do it all right and still get this really rough kind of outcome. But I agree with you. You can certainly make it rougher if you start certain pieces at the wrong maybe point in life. And
Yeah.
I like to joke with clients, and I make sure my kids hear this all the time. Like, when you have so much money that you just hate your money and you just want it to go away, you do three things: have kids, buy a boat, and start a restaurant. Right? Three quickest ways to get rid of your money: kids, boats, and restaurants, man.
It's so funny. I've had all three of those. I have two of the three, right? I don't have a boat anymore, but I have restaurants. And I was just having this conversation again yesterday, right, with my wife, and I was like, hey, let's, I was checking in on the acquisition of our restaurants because
Yeah.
I'm selling them, right, and for profit, thank goodness, right,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm a very rare few where my restaurants have always turned a profit, right, and they've always made me money, minimal money, but they've made money.
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, when I look at the risk profiles of all my investments and all my holdings, what's concerning is the thing that makes me the least amount of money and is the biggest pain in my side is the thing that has the most liability, right? And like
Sure.
the restaurant, it's like balancing spinning plates on sticks, right? And when it's going great, it's phenomenal. It's like, wow, that's a really cool thing to look at. When it's not, you're sweeping up stuff from the. And so I agree with you. If you want to throw it away, it's a great place to throw it away. Great experience building it. However, it's a great way to burn money. But
Oh, it's a great business, and if it's your bit, like I've seen people be amazingly successful in restaurants, but on a probability basis, like a restaurant is a low probability success rate when it comes to a business model. It's a tough business, paper thin margins, people's taste comes into play.
correct,
The
literally.
one server having a tough day, and suddenly there's somebody out there just telling about how terrible your restaurant is, you should never go there. So it is a tough business, because you got to nail it every single time
With every person, every dish, every coffee. I
Yeah,
100% agree.
yeah.
I just had one of our locations had because for better or for worse, I still get all the Google reviews to my phone notification. And this one lady who got in an argument with the restaurant owner to the right of our restaurant, right? Because it's on the Plaza in Heat, which is, basically a square, and then where they did the former Spanish marching and everything. It's where everyone gathers. We have a restaurant, this location right on the Plaza, and got in an argument with a lady at the ice cream shop, right? And then we get the bad review because it was in front of our restaurant. Right. And you're just like, what do you do about this? I'm like,
Yeah.
so why do I have to deal with this? Why am I dealing with a review on a Sunday morning?
I'll tell you my restaurant experience story, because I think it's funny to me, and kind of like definitely highlights this. But so I was in college, and I started a couple different businesses in college, and I was kind of shutting one down that didn't work out so well, and I was like, man, I just need to get cash flow. I need a job of some sort, while I figure out what's next. And so a friend of mine is a a server at Applebee's, and makes pretty good money. He's real good at it, and made pretty good money. And he's like, man, I'll get you a job, no problem. I'll get you hooked up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's sweet, man. So go in here, first day. My job is just to shadow him. So I'm shadowing him, trying to learn what's happening here. And we're about 2 hours into this shift, and we're walking by a table that was not our table, not our section, nothing to do with us. The lady just grabs him like, hey, and just lights him up. Are you people stupid? Blah, blah, blah. And I am just like, whoa, what is happening here? Like, what is going on? This is not our lady. We have had zero interaction. We have no idea what's happening in her world. And she is just lighting him up about how terrible, he must be dumb and obviously having a bad day.
Wow.
And so he's like, ma'am, I understand. I'll go fix it right away. So we go back into the back, and I was like, dude, like, what was that? And he's like totally nonchalant about it. He's like, oh no, man, that happens all the time. It happens all the time. No big deal. And I'm like, wait a minute, man. Like, people just berate you like you're an idiot for no reason. And he's like, yeah, it happens. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think this is for me, man. So I said, I appreciate it, but this probably isn't for me. Like, I'm willing to take any ripping that I own, man. I'll
it's take my but ripping. I want to earn it.
but to just be like randomly yelled at and called stupid, man, I'm going to struggle with that one. And so I have a total of 2 hours of restaurant experience, and I just told him, like, just go ahead and rip up the paperwork. You don't have to process a check for those 2 hours. Have a good day.
Don't pay me.
Yeah.
That's so.
Yeah. We'll just call it good.
That's so funny you say that, because I'm a horrible restaurant owner, right? In the sense that, like, I just don't really care. I don't do well caring about people's opinions, right? I do well at refining the business. Like, the business itself is, we hold ourselves to a really high standard, right? I always believe in consistency, quality, and intent. Those are like my words. And the restaurant does that. However, right, if you bring your complaints to me, it will not be met with what you would consider otherwise restaurant customer service. And I've had people in the cities at the restaurants and local communities where I'm walking by, and I've had people come up to me and lay into me. Hey, I'm walking with my son. I have the stroller, mind my own business, enjoying the day. I'm in a tank top and shorts. I am not in restaurant owner mode. Yeah. And they'll yell, I'm like, hey, like, you got me wrong, but you seem so upset. You want your money back? I'll give you your money back, right? However, right, I don't care if you eat at my restaurant. You say, I'll never eat there again. Good. Don't, because I don't want this experience from you ever again.
Right.
And then, what I think is the great way to handle things ends up on some Facebook group, right? And then I've ended up in local newspapers before, right? And you're sitting here like, my wife's like, I just, you care too much about consistency and, machinery like execution, right, and accuracy to be involved in a restaurant, like from the people, right? And so I tell people all, absolutely, my personality, the finance business mentality does not have any business in a restaurant. So, everyone listening, if you're thinking about having a restaurant, listen to Chad and myself. There is a chance that you can succeed. You can also win the lottery. And so, I know far more restaurant owners, and I by far more, most all of them, who've closed their door at a loss, right? And I know one guy who's driving a Lamborghini. All right.
Yes.
Just one.
I mean, it's kind of like being a singer, man, like, or a basketball player. Like, there's a bunch of good basketball players, but only a few of them are going to make a true big living, and make it rich in doing that. And I think in some terms, every business is that way, right? You got to have this balance. And, I don't lack empathy. I doubt you lack empathy. It's not about, not being a people person or not lacking empathy, but yeah, I'm kind of very similar to you. Like, I have more defined, like, okay, how do we fix the problem? As opposed to that, my wife is phenomenal at the, like, I can hear you're upset and I can hear, and I'm like, yeah, let's fix that problem. Like, let's get you your money back. Let's go make sure that we don't make that mistake again. Like, I want to fix it. I want you to have a great experience. But
Yeah.
On the emotional side, I'm going to be a little less emotionally connected about how I think I should deal with that. And that's, it kind of works in my business. If you're crying and freaking out about what's happening in the market because it's down 20% in a couple of weeks or whatever, you probably don't want to come in here and let's have a good cry about it together. Like, that's not what you're paying me for. You're kind of paying me to take a little bit of an unemotional, more methodical look at the big picture. And so, yeah, that personality type, like, there are just things that I could never succeed at. And I know that, but it doesn't mean I'm not able to be empathetic with people. It just means I definitely handle that situation in a solution oriented fashion versus a let's get very emotional about it fashion.
No, I agree, Chad. And, that's a great transition because we've spent so much of the time talking about really great topics, right? No regrets there, right? However, I want to know about Prospera. Like, tell me about, and my mind always wants to go Spanish with things. So, especially when there's an A at the end.
Yeah.
So,
roll the R. Yeah. Let's hear your best R roll with that one. Prospera. Yeah. No, I'm not obviously good at that. But,
talk to us about it.
Yeah. So kind of through these life experiences, I've had some really great people in my life and my professional life. Like, my dad taught me to work hard. My mom taught me to care. That combination's been good. I've had some really phenomenal, like, people along the way. I had a mentor early in my career that, really kind of framed things in a way that I really understood. And a couple things that he kind of told me. He said, most people in my experience tell everybody what they're about, but don't do that. Just go show people what you're about. Find things you care about and get involved and show people how you can help. And so I've done that. I've been very involved in my community, very involved in economic development, small business support and chambers of commerce and things along the way. One of the other things he told me was that resonated very much with me, and because I value learning and education, was that most people have a 1-year career 30 times over. If you really want to build a career, every year's got to be different. You got to constantly learn and grow. Don't repeat the same year twice, right? Have a true 30-year career, not a 1-year career 30 times. And I've tried to follow that. I've kind of done lifelong learning and, continuing ed and gotten some letters behind my name that sometimes I bother with, sometimes I don't, but the letters aren't what's important to me. It's that learning and that growth. And so, so as I've come through my career, I started in mortgage lending while I still worked, while I was still in college. That led to an opportunity to move into commercial and the banking side on the commercial side, which kind of led to opportunities in more running the bank and some of their investment side, which has kind of led to this. But as we started, in our initial conversation, like, a lot of this, what I've found in finance is things are so disconnected. Most people's finance is very disconnected. And I've struggled with that in various capacities along the way, throughout my career. As a banker, trying to get the client and their insurance guy and their accountant and everybody together to kind of understand how it needs to come together to work for the business. That was a challenge all the time. No different when I come out here to the advisory world. I find that everybody's kind of disconnected in silos. And so years ago, I was introduced to this kind of idea of a family office model at scale. How do you bring together some of those pieces? How do you connect some of those pieces for people? And the ultra wealthy, they work around things called family offices. And family offices really bring together all your risk management, which is all your insurance world, all of your estate planning, which is not only the legal documents, but also the funding of those plans that comes underneath of that, the investment managers, the CFO for the business, they all work in one office together. And this really allows efficiency for the ultra wealthy in decision making and execution. And so I was introduced to the concept of bringing that down to the masses years ago. And in my career, working for people and with people, I've always kind of been able to have these conversations about what does family office model concept really mean. And various people along the way have kind of gotten excited about it. But when it comes to how do you execute on that, that has always been a little bit of a challenge. And I'm very entrepreneurial, always have been my whole life. And so when I started Prospera, in our world, you have the option to work for the big corporate broker dealer, to be a franchise of the big corporate broker dealer, or to kind of go completely independent, which requires a lot more of you on the business side and understanding how to put all the pieces of the business together, but comes with this freedom to really build it the way that you believe it best helps people. And so that's kind of been my focus at Prospera, is building an ecosystem, a financial ecosystem that plugs as many of those holes as possible and coordinates them. So it ended up taking kind of a multi-company structure in order to really actually accomplish that. So we're completely branded Prospera across the board, but under the hood, there's really two separate companies that exist. Prospera Financial focuses with, really most of my clients are business owners or folks with fairly complex planning needs. I have plenty of those kind of 2W2 folks that I work with, but the core of my business are really business owners and people with more complexity in their world, multifamily, multiple businesses, those types of things. And so what I've put together with Prospera is really on the financial side, we're able to dig in and help connect the business to the personal. So everything in Prospera is really non-market based work that we do over there. So, that's insurance products, that's life insurance, annuities, income annuities, it's income planning, it's all of that stuff, but really not product driven. Don't go out and sell product in there. It's really driven by the bigger picture planning. And that's generally done over with Prospera Investment Advisors, which is a fee only fiduciary investment advisory firm. So we do investment management, financial planning, and run an estate platform. So we're really trying to connect all the way from the basic risk management all the way through to planning and execution of what happens when you're not here anymore, and being able to plug all those gaps. And I'm not able to do it solely on my own, right? I have a partner for property and casualty insurance that I write through that makes sure that piece is tight. I work with a partner through the insurance side of things that supports my, in the back office to make sure that stuff is tight. So it's not trying to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but it's really having the freedom and flexibility to put the right partnerships together to where you come in the door at Prospera and here are all of the things that our team is going to be able to handle and execute on and review and make sure they're connected. And so for clients, that might mean, making sure that, hey, you've got this great business and it's doing really well. And now how does that translate to helping you achieve what you're trying to achieve in your personal life and for your children, because running a great business is great. But how are we making sure that business is executing on the things that you really want out of life? Because for most of us, even if running a great business and having a great business is one of the goals on the list, it's very rarely the one at the top. It's more often what we're trying to do in order to take our kids on trips, let them experience, life a little differently, let them educate themselves without the burden of all of the debt that comes on the other side of that for a lot of these kids. So, in my world, I'm always trying to connect up what do you really care about, and what are we really trying to accomplish, and what are all the avenues that we have available to execute on that. So really working across that spectrum with people to connect those missing dots, and all the way to the super simple stuff, like you've got a net worth of 1.2 million, and you've got, you mentioned liability. You find a lot of people where you got a net worth of X, and you've got basic home and auto insurance, which leaves massive liability gaps there that nobody's addressing. And I'm not saying that your insurance person isn't good, but they may not have enough of the picture to understand that they've left this gap. And so that's a really basic disconnect that we see a lot. But you see it over on the estate side with great businesses, no succession plan in place for the business, no estate plan in place in case something happens along the way to make sure that the estate can execute a succession plan. And you just see all of these opportunities to help, kind of take the worry away for people and solve some of these problems, when you can see the whole big picture and you have the platform and the capabilities and the people behind you that can do that. And there's not a team of 20 people behind me at Prospera doing all of this. It's being able to execute and establish those strategic partnerships in a way that we are able to bring the right expert to the table when that's the topic at hand. And so that's really been my focus at Prospera, is how do I build that ecosystem that it doesn't matter which door you come in, we're going to take a very comprehensive look at your entire picture and then work from there to help you execute on what you're trying to do and fund the dream, man. I mean, that's what we're all doing in all of this, is trying to fund the dream. And for some people, the dream is to build it. And for some people, the dream is to clock in at 8, clock out at 5, forget about it, and make a good living doing it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with any of them, but we're all trying to fund a dream. And for me, like being an entrepreneur and building it and being able to go out and be super proud of, what we're doing for people and how we're helping them, and feeling like you've made life, and you've made things, and you've made decisions, and you've made outcomes easier for people to understand and execute and achieve. Like that's the drive. How is very methodical, very systematic, very process oriented, no different than how you run your restaurant. But the why is all about what my mom first taught me, is leave things better than you found them. The how is a lot like how my dad taught me, methodical, relentless execution. And so those kind of pieces of who I am as a person kind of come right into the business and how our model works. And I think it's fairly unique in our industry. I think our industry has gone from stock pickers to asset allocators to retirement planners to financial planners, and now we're kind of in this next phase where we are more wealth managers, which is a much more encompassing term. And I think where Prospera is at and what we're building on is hopefully at the leading edge of where our industry is headed, in understanding that it's the disconnects that cost people a lot of money. Oh, I've lost you, I think.
No, I mean, Chad, and I speak with a lot of folks, especially in the. Are we there?
Oh yeah, I lost you for a second. Sorry.
Can you hear me, Chad?
I can hear you. Yes.
Or I turned off. I turned off the video for a moment. I don't know what was going on, but I'm sure the team will make it all work and flow. But like I was saying, I think that what you've put together is a comprehensive ecosystem. Oftentimes, and most of my clients, 60% of our clients telehelping are in the financial wealth management, financial advisor space. Incredibly niche, right? Most of them, I'd say, fall into like they help if you're between 1.5 and 1.7, that 2 points there is, where I work with. And, I think it's great that you have an open door to so much strategy and what I refer to as a tool belt of experts and ability to kind of be what people need you to be, depending on where they're at in their life and their career. So I think that's an incredible way. And, one thing that we love doing is when people, because we have a fairly healthy and growing group of viewers and subscribers. And so I'm sure there's going to be many people who find what you've said to be interesting, as I find incredibly unique from all the conversations I have. What would be a great way for people to contact you? How do you generally take client inquiries, and what would you say your typical client avatar would be? Who is your client?
Yeah, I mean, the folks that we work with are not necessarily all ultra high net worth. I think, I'm not a huge believer in this idea that I'm going to give you $1 minimum or you can't work with me. I think by the nature of the comprehensive work that we do, tend to work mostly with business owners, folks that have higher net worths, more complicated family structures, business dynamics, real estate, kind of a little more complicated financial situations is generally where we kind of shine. But it really starts out with just an initial interview, an initial conversation. And you can visit prosperainvestmentadvisors.com, find out some information on there. Our other website is iprospera.com. That focuses more on some of those safe money strategies. Both of those sides get you to the place that you can, book an appointment to talk, and it really starts with a conversation. I mean, not so different than, what you and I've had today. Like, let's understand each other. Let's understand your perspective, my perspective, what's important. Talk about how we work. We work in a very kind of prescribed manner of we really focus on understanding the big picture and understanding what you're trying to accomplish and where things sit from your financial picture standpoint. And once we understand that, now we can dive into, strategy to accomplish the mission. But it's a process. I think if you call most investment advisors, if you just dialed one out of the phone book, they're going to have you an account set up in 15 minutes and we'll get your money transferred over, and you'll be in portfolio A, and we're the best ever managing portfolio A, and we just crush it every time. And certainly we could do that. I mean, we're no different. We could transfer assets like everybody else, but the value and the value that we bring to people is much more comprehensive than that. So it starts with just a conversation to understand you. And I've certainly had folks where, based on what they believe and what we believe, is just not a good fit. And that's okay too. We're certainly a little different in how we address things than your average kind of broker dealer off the corner. So, if it's compelling to have these in-depth conversations, it just starts with a conversation, a phone call. So phone call through our website, book a time. We'll spend an hour and a half and really, try to understand each other and what we're trying to accomplish. And then from there, it's just checking off all of the boxes that exist in this world of finance. Have we looked at this? Are we comfortable? What are the decisions? One of the things I think is different about us is I'm not in love with any product. I'm not in love with any company. It's really tailored to the individual's specific circumstance, and then the strategy that we utilize, the insurance tool that we utilize, that's simply execution of a plan and a strategy. And I think people welcome that. You know, I've worked in firms where everybody ends up with the same exact set of product. And that's not how people work. So our industry's kind of tried to commoditize that, and I think that's one of the things that creates those disconnects. And so a conversation, and we go from there.
Yeah.
Did I lose you again?
No, Chad, and man, where do conversations go? You know, I've had the fortunate opportunity to speak to. You hear me?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Don't worry. The team will chop it up. But you know, that's great. And you know, everything starts with a conversation, whether it's, you know, global political issues, home, raising children, marriage, business. So I think that's a great way to approach things. Open up the platform, the table, set the opportunity to discover. So you know, Chad, what I'll say is, you know, I appreciate your time today. And, you know, I know that we've had some connection issues. I think one, because there's a huge storm on my end, we're having quite a cold front come through in terms of wind. And whenever the wind gets tough here in Vegas, it oftentimes makes everything difficult, even the internet. And so apologize for that, but I'll have the team clean it up. Nonetheless, I truly appreciate your time, and it's been a pleasure. What a great conversation. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, man, I've really enjoyed it. I hope it, you know, helps other folks kind of see that you know, when you're out there doing your hustle and grind every day, like there's more behind that, and there's drive. You know, the thing that drives an entrepreneur normally isn't just money. I mean, I think we're all out here trying to make a living, trying to do good for our family, but you know, the drive behind and the motivation behind pretty much every entrepreneur I know is the intent of helping other people with whatever it is that person is passionate about. So yeah, man, find your passion, find what you love, and then, you know, build a business around it.
Well said. Well said, Chad. Well, sir, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Again, I appreciate this conversation so much. You know, definitely one of my more longer sessions, which is great because it just wasn't filled with a lull or a silent moment. So, sir, I appreciate you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day and on into the weekend. And I look forward to staying connected with you and having you as part of my network and someone I get to communicate with.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. Super appreciate it and enjoyed it. Thanks, Cody.
All right. Be well, Chad. Talk with you soon.
You too. Bye.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.